Hello and welcome everybody to day 2 of week 3 of the SPL. My name is LHS and I'm going to be your host for today. Joining me on the desk is Taco. How you doing, Taco?
I'm feeling pretty good and definitely feeling pretty excited for these matchups that we have going on today.
Definitely, EU is definitely the most exciting day, I would think, just because, you know, there's so many teams vying for that spot for Valencia. Speaking of Valencia, we have 4 teams from EU going to Valencia. We have 3 teams from NA. And it's a tight race right now.
It's definitely been really close all around, especially in this EU bracket. You have so many teams that are able to contend for that top 4 position that, I mean, anything is really up in the air when it comes to EU right now.
Definitely. Let's take a look at the standings to see where everyone kind of lays right now. At the top, we have Dignitas. And then we have Enix, but look at Elevate. Elevate only has a 1-point differential from that middle of the pack.
Elevate only has a 1-point differential, and there's a lot of 5s. So many 5s, actually, between Obey, Energy, and Rival, and these are all heavy names to keep in consideration when it comes to the top of the crop for EU. And then Elevate, of course, like you just said, you cannot count these guys out.
Definitely. They have been trending upwards. A little bit of a hiccup with their whole jungler situation, but speaking of Elevate, they're our first game for today. Looking at the schedule, we have Obey versus Elevate. Should be a good game. Then we have NRG Burrito, followed by Dignitas versus the Poppies, and ending the day, my personal favorite of the matchups is Enix versus Rival.
And really, a couple of these sets, I would say in particular, especially considering that last one, they could really go either way. There's a lot of teams that aren't really looking for that split contention right now. They want the clean 2-0s. They want 3 points to their name, because the more points you get right now, the better you're going to be looking heading into week number 4. And there's not a whole lot of time left when it comes to this split. Like, there's only 5 weeks of competing. So really, today, I think, is going to be the make it or break it point for a lot of these teams.
Definitely. And speaking of a team that wants to get as many points as they can to their name, Obey is our first matchup. So we got Obey and Elevate. Obey definitely looking very, very good. And Elevate kind of showing their promise right now.
Obey have always been considered a very strong team, especially in the previous splits, and just looking at the way that they've been performing. So it's obvious that they've been shaping up to try and maintain that #1 slotting, or that #1 consideration. And I think that Elevate have a lot of work cut out for them. They have 4 points right now, but if they want to find the split or even a potential 2-0 onto Obey, their execution today is going to need to be flawless.
Definitely. And one of the biggest points to look at for this game is going to be the duo lane. You've got the cerebral duo lane of EmilZy and Ataraxia, and then you've got the Bruise Bros, Elevate. Jermain and Dardez going to want to punch you in the face. So look at Ataraxia. He kind of does what he wants. I mean, he broke out the Transcendence Rama, who does that. Ataraxia does that.
Ataraxia does do that, as well as just Ataraxia does a lot of things, in particular for Obey. His positioning and control as a carry, I think, is something that we're not very familiar with, because typically we see the ADC just trying to be that free casting aspect, but when it comes to Ataraxia, he wants to kind of just charge straight into you, and I think that can make things very interesting between him and Jermain, because that's a similar playstyle between the two. If Ataraxia gets the chance to take the 1v1, he's going to look for it, and Jermain, he has always looked for that 1v1.
Jermain is definitely going to be looking for that 1v1, and it'll be interesting to see the matchup here to see who comes out on top, because, you know, Ataraxia is the more cerebral player. Is he going to bait out Jermain, or is Jermain just going to be able to punch him in the face?
If Jermain isn't careful, I think that his aggression could potentially work against him, because Obey just have so much team chemistry. I could very easily see Ataraxia playing things off and forcing out an awkward fight where Twig just rotates on over and picks off Jermain. And really, if Jermain falls behind, I think that things could look a little bit iffy for Elevate, because he tends to be one of those catalyst factors to really get the team going.
Definitely. It'll be interesting to see which one of these hunters comes out on top with their different playstyles. I'm looking at Ataraxia to kind of bait out Jermain, kind of get into situations where he's not going to be exactly that comfortable, and take advantage of that.
I would really just love to see these two get to go at it as long as possible, because they are two very excellent hunters in EU, very highly regarded by a lot of the pro players and I think the general public. And I just think that it's so much fun whenever you get to see two people with an aggressive kind of play style sort of just mesh in like butt heads.
Definitely. And as good as this dual lane is going to be, we got to look at the mid lane matchup. We got to look at PrettyPriMe, who's arguably the best mid laner in the world right now, especially when he is able to get this Morrigan of his.
I mean, you were talking with me about it earlier today even, and I would have to agree with you. PrettyPriMe and his Goppel in particular, which you pointed out, and that Morrigan that he's been favoring and the way that he's able to just bring it to his team. It's very evident that he's trying to utilize as much of these mage kits as possible.
Definitely. If anybody knows their god, it's PrettyPriMe. He knows his Vulcan. He knows this Morrigan. And as a mid laner, he knows all of the other roles as well a little bit. I mean, you've seen him on the Circuit. You've seen him on the Hunbats. How does having PrettyPriMe on this Morrigan kind of transform a team comp?
It just allows a team to be a little bit more diverse in particular, because it's not just the Morrigan pick and like the ultimate that he utilizes. He also utilizes just the Morrigan's kit in general with the way that he abuses the cooldown factor. And I say that in the sense that he uses that invis to the best of his ability, as well as the stun. He's constantly looking for it. So it's not all about the ultimate when it comes to PrettyPriMe on Morrigan. He also likes a lot of the other controlling aspects that god can handle.
Definitely. Speaking of control mages, Nulisa, his lane opposition, kind of favors those control mages. We've seen her on the Nox, and then, of course, you've got her Yanis.
And, I mean, I kind of just want to see her on Yanis all day long, if that's what it means for Elevate to win their sets so, like, in such an ensuring manner, really. It was a completely dominant set, I think, on Thursday by Elevate, and that's all I want to see every single time if it means that they're going to pick up the wins.
Definitely. Nulisa on this Yanis just fits with Elevate style. You've got Jermain and Dardez, who the Bruise brothers, going in deep, and then you've got the Yanis ultimate, Yanis portals to kind of get them out of danger and out of trouble.
And I think that's why it works so well with Yanis and this team in particular. It's just because Yanis isn't really a favored in the meta kind of god right now. Yanis, if anything, is the last god you really want to be picking, because a lot of people just complain the early aggression just isn't there, the damage isn't really there. But Nulisa doesn't necessarily look for the damage early on. She just looks for, like you said, the controlling aspect. She wants to get in or she wants to get out. And a lot of the times when you've got Jermain and Dardez on your team, you're looking to get out after picking up some kills.
So looking across the board, you know, you got to kind of favor Obey. Overall, pin on paper, they just have the strengths. Who do you have winning this game?
I think if Elevate are able to have their top-tier execution and really just play to the strengths of the compositions that they've won with in the past, they can find a split, although I do find it unlikely for them to take a clean 2-0. I would say a split more than anything.
I would love to see Elevate split. I would really love it, but I think this has to go to Obey. I think Obey just has the talent, the skill, and the execution. I mean, they have been amazing, unreal with their execution so far this season.
I mean, I can't disagree with that in the slightest. Obey are a very strong top-tier team, but I gotta play devil's advocate every single time. You know, it makes things a little bit more exciting.
You gotta root for the underdog when you can. And speaking of rooting for the underdog, our next game of the day is gonna be NRG and Burrito. Definitely a tall task in front of Burrito to take down the giants of NRG.
This isn't really even the final boss form yet for Burrito either. This is kind of just another Titan in their way, really. And if I'm Burrito, I'm not really looking for the split or even the wins in general. I'm really just looking to develop as a team. That's what they can really take, is their experience from NRG. However this set may go, what part of the game that they play out well, what compositions are they finding to work best for themselves and contending with these top-tier teams. And I think a lot of that's just going to boil down to how well, I'd say, the individual players can mesh up all together.
Speaking of individual players, you gotta look at Demi on NRG. He's a guy, you tell him to be the lane bully, he's got it. You tell him to be, lose the lane, but have a better team fight, he's got it. He's gonna do his job with his head down and just do work.
A couple more unconventional picks from Demi so far. I mean, we see him rocking the tier right now. It's not exactly a god that's been heavily favored as of late. When you've got Bologna, you've got Osiris. They've been the real controlling aspects of the solo lane, but it's exactly what you just said. He doesn't mind taking up that losing matchup if it means a better team fight. And when it comes to NRG, the team fight is all that they really care about because they're so damn good at it.
Having a player like Demi who can, kind of chameleon and waffle between, being the super aggressive lane bully or kind of just lose lane, but lose lane gracefully, How does that impact the team fights? How does that impact the team comps and how EmilZy plays?
Well, even when Dimmy's like massively behind in the solo lane, it's not like it's really ever affecting the team aspect. I mean, EmilZy is still able to play around each other in a way that it prevents Dimmy from falling behind to a sense where he's completely ineffective. He's still incredibly useful whenever he does end up making those rotations to the team fights. So that's really all that there is to keep an eye on for him.
I think you nailed it on the head. Incredibly useful. That's Dimmy. If you had to sum him up in a nutshell, Dimmy is incredibly useful. And on the other side, the other solo laner is going to be Sibby. And Sibby's one of these guys, when they were in the Challenger circuit, he was one of their harder carries. He was a guy who would get ahead and make these really aggressive rotations.
And that's the thing about Sibby is that he's going to still be kind of leaning towards that flashy, I need to look for the 1v1 potential, because he might let that play against him. I think if he tries to play this out too aggressively against Dimmy, I mean, we know Dimmy's okay with losing the lane. He's never going to let himself fall so far behind, though, that he's completely useless. And it can be incredibly difficult for an up-and-coming solo laner such as Sibby to recognize how to really back off of an aggressive environment, because he's so used to trying to carry his team, it could just end up biting him in the butt.
Definitely. And with his preference for those aggressive rotations, EmilZy is gonna know that, and they're gonna try and shut it down. And if anybody can shut down a misplay or a misrotation, it's gonna be EmilZy, right?
And that's exactly what Burrito had to keep in mind, is that it's fun to make those, aggressive rotations early on, but the second that it turns against you, and even the slightest bit, EmilZy is going to capitalize and punish you every single time. We've seen EmilZy come back numerous times because of those sort of circumstances, and they've won games where they probably shouldn't have, or should have taken a lot longer for them to find a lead in, and that's just the risk aspect, risk versus reward.
All right, so looking at this game, another one where it looks like EmilZy is, heavily favored going into this. Across the board, who do you give this game to right now?
I mean, I think that Burrito have a lot to work on, but I would definitely have to just say EmilZy 2-0.
I absolutely agree. EmilZy is, they're returning to form. They're not quite at the world champion status yet, but Burrito, they just haven't put it all together yet. They're still working on having everything gel. I think this is an EmilZy 2-0, but Obey gets a lot of learning experience out of this game.
I think the Burrito gets a ton of learning experience out of this game, and that's really the main thing to keep in mind, because sometimes that's really all you need. When you're such a new team to the SPL, coming fresh out of the relegations chapter, I don't think that there's anything wrong with taking a 2-0 to a two-time world champion team.
Definitely, especially EmilZy. They've been, they have been so dominant for so long. You lose to EmilZy, and it's just like, okay, we're not the first to do this, obviously.
Yeah, move on, take it all in stride, take it on the chin, and just move on to the next one.
All right, so another dominant team that we're going to be looking at next is Dignitas versus the Poppies. Dignitas at the top of EU right now. They have been doing incredible work. And the Poppies, the new blood, trending upward. That's been our theme for this split. But can they trend that much upwards?
Can they? I think that they can. I think that if Dignitas are not careful against the Poppies, they could find themselves in a similar situation as Rival on Thursday, where Poppies were able to find the split against Rival. It's obvious that the player talent is available when it comes to this team, and I think that they do have what it takes if, like I said, Dig just aren't careful. And it's not even Dig being careful. Poppies have really been seeming to find their stride. And so while I think that a 2-0 is still a little bit more unlikely, I think that the split potential is definitely there.
I don't know that I exactly agree with that, but you got to look at Poppies. They've had great early games almost every game. That's been very consistent. So it's whether or not they can really take that early lead and kind of establish it. But who's going to be not allowing that to happen is Cuvo Fred. He's been around the scene since the scene was established. He's going to be doing work, and his god pool is so diverse, you can't ban him out.
Yeah, you're never really looking to try and ban out Cuvo. He's very similar to a couple of players in the scene where his god pool can really just be anything. I mean, we've seen him on the tankier gods such as Robin. We've seen him on the hard carry assassins like Nemesis and Kamazats and stuff, and it's always just crazy to me how just when you think, what could he possibly whip out next, and then he just does something different. That just goes to show his experience and just how seasoned he really is from the SPL.
Being able to have a jungler who you can't ban out, how beneficial is that to a team and to Dignitas themselves.
Oh, it just opens up like an infinite amount of compositions. Granted, majority of teams are going to stick a little bit more to the meta 9 times out of 10, but just knowing that no matter what, he's always going to have some kind of pocket pick that he can break out, so your team never really has to be concerned about when to pick up his god in a drafting stage is such a huge beneficiary, because then they can worry about the other picks for their players who might not necessarily have as diverse of a god pool.
All right. That's definitely true. Cuvo Fred is going to be making an impact in this game in some way or another, whether it's in pick and bans or in the actual game. And his lane opposition, Dalo, kind of has a different style. He's all over the place. He makes these funky rotations where he's not exactly where you expect him to be. How is he going to disrupt this game?
I mean, he kind of plays the funkier gods right now. He's been leaning a little bit more towards that Ratatasker still, and I think that it's kind of fun watching him on a slightly unconventional pick, gods that aren't super favored right now, but I think that it plays into Poppy's playstyle as a whole very well, just because they all love that aggressive factor, and I think that they play best when they play to their strengths, and their strength is definitely just grouping as a team and looking to just siege.
Definitely. Poppies definitely have this aggressive play style, and I know we always look at NRG as the team that can punish you if you over-aggress or if you're out of position, but can Dignitas also bring that to the table here?
I think that Dignitas have, if anything, tended to struggle a little bit more in the early game. So if Poppies wanted to try and capitalize on any stage of the game, it would probably be the early, which is what we've seen them be keen to do. It's just carrying that early game advantage into the mid and late that I think could be a little bit more difficult for them to try and close out against such a strong team like Dignitas.
Definitely. And I think one of the biggest benefits that Dignitas has going into this game is they have so many carries. One of their biggest carries is Zeros. He loves these mage hunters, the Chronos, the Soul. He's been playing them all split, and he's been doing work.
Oh, yeah, Zeros is an absolutely insane player. Even when he took off a little bit of time from competitive and was in the coaching role, I still don't think that he really missed a beat. Kind of similar to Maniac when he came back. It's just these guys, you could just tell that they've been such talented players, and that talent just never really seemed to leave them.
Definitely. How much do you think he learned from his experiences as the coach for NRG, and how has that transformed his game?
It just gives you like a top-down overview from the coaching position, because you start looking at the game not necessarily from just your perspective in the mid lane role where it's like, oh, I've got to split my wave with like 3 different people all the time, but you also just get to look at the map as a whole and really just consider every single factor. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's mostly Zero shot calling when it comes to Dignitas.
Definitely. He's definitely, it has the appearance that he's like a player coach where he's calling the plays, and it kind of makes sense that he's playing all these utility gods and making the shot calls right now.
Yeah, and I mean, the utility gods also have an insane amount of burst. Soul and Thoth, he's completely insane on these gods, and it goes to show in his gameplay without a doubt that Zeros just really knows how to pilot almost anything in that mid lane role.
Definitely. But his opposition, Oh Boom, kind of more your traditional mid laner. He's got that Vulcan on lock sometimes.
Sometimes. I think that's the key word, and really the times that we haven't seen too much success out of Oh Boom is when he falls behind, and that just tends to come from teams trying to focus him out and really just isolate him from the rest of his team. So what Poppies really need to do is they need to just protect Oh off like every single team fight or situation that they're looking to break into. Oh Boom needs to be protected, and that's what I think will ultimately be the most difficult task for the Poppies today.
It sounds like you're saying that the most important thing for the Poppies today is going to be having their aggression be held in check a little bit and making smart aggressive rotations.
Very much so. They need to be careful with their positioning, because Dignitas is one of those top teams in EU right now. I mean, they're top of the leaderboards for a reason, and it's because if you step out of line, even in the slightest bit, they're going to punish you every single time for it.
All right, so what's your prediction for this game? Do you have Poppies finding a game here?
I think that if Poppies can find a game against Rival, they have the potential to find a game against Dig.
Really? You're going to equate Rival and Dignitas right now?
I would equate Rival and Dignitas. Rival, I think, is a severely... I wouldn't call them underrated, actually. I can't call them underrated anymore. I think that they're actually working their way into a lot of people's hearts, but I think that Poppies have what it takes.
I would love to see Poppies more splits. It would make this hunt for Valencia a lot more exciting. And speaking of Rival, they're our last game of the day. Enix and Rival. This is a game with huge implications. I mean, we looked at the standings earlier. There's a point that separates Obey and Elevate. Enix has a slight different, they've differentiated themselves from the pack. They're setting up 7 points, so ahead of that 5-man middle pack. But Rival, you know, they dropped the game to the Poppies. Can they fight their way into this game? They're obviously probably going to be playing with a chip on their shoulder, wouldn't you say?
And that's the thing about Rival right now is that this is kind of a make it or break it set for them, because if they take another split, they'll be stuck with that 6-point contention period, while everybody else in EU, I think, will start working their way towards that 7, 8, and higher standing. And so it could be incredibly difficult for Rival to bounce back in weeks number 4 and 5. If they find the split here today, they are really going to be gunning for that 2-0, but against a team like Enix, how likely is that to happen? I can't even be entirely sure.
I don't think any of us can really be entirely sure. So let's take a look at the solo lane matchup. You've got Ducky. Ducky's been around for a long time. He's kind of been in and out of the SPL. He's not had the most stable time in the league, but he's one of those guys who plays very well, and as long as he can keep up his current level of play, he's always going to have a spot on a team.
I would have to agree with that, and I also just think that a large portion of things, it's just been, Ducky's never really been on a team of his caliber, so I feel like he's always been kind of held back, but now he's finally on a team with like top-of-the-line players from EU, and it's showing in his gameplay entirely. He's seeming a lot more confident. He's willing to play that aggressive factor, as well as just that team controlling factor, so it's almost like he's a hybrid of Demi and Deathwalker in a sense, just because he knows the matchups and he's willing to try things out, but he's also okay with taking the losing lane if it means a better team fight.
Definitely. I think that's the key for solo lane success right now, is being able to have that variability, the ability to have, you know, a lane bully in your god pool, the ability to lose lane but have a better team fight. And I think somebody that, you know, obviously has that on lock right now is Deathwalker, especially now. He's, you know, last year we weren't even talking about Deathwalker, but now he's got Divios copying his build, and if Divios is copying you, you're doing something right.
Oh, you're definitely doing something right. And Deathwalker, when it comes to Rival and just looking at the wins that they've been able to secure, he's been doing almost everything right for this team. And I think he's kind of a bit of a saving grace for Rival at times as far as keeping them in check, because you're right. Deathwalker really wasn't in the minds of people. When you think solo lane matchups in E, you're kind of just like Dimmy. Every single time, it's just Dimmy. I mean, now it's been like maniaKK and Dimmy, but like Deathwalker is 100% up there, no doubt in my mind. It's really just because this janky play style has really just transitioned from the scrim phase into the online and LAN portion, and it just shows how much skill that this guy really has.
Definitely, but I want to back it up. You're going to do my man Variety like that? You're not going to include him into that solo lane?
You got to love Variety, but I'm all about like Deathwalker right now. He's on the up and rise. I mean, Variety's always been there, but Variety's kind of similar to Deathwalker, where he was left off the radar for a bit up until Worlds.
Okay, all right. So looking at this game, Enix definitely is looking like the favorites. What does Rival have to do to fight in this game, and who do you think wins this game overall?
Who do I think wins this game overall? That's probably the most difficult question. I would prefer to see a split here, just because I think that it'd make things incredibly exciting as far as the top 4 contention for Valencia is concerned. I think that this might come down purely to the drafting. I couldn't really favor either team. I think that it's just going to be who finds the better draft that is able to work to their strengths in this set. So that should be a really interesting matchup all around.
Definitely. Ever since Alpha Jackal became the coach for Rival, they've had a great drafting strategy. I think Rival finds the first game, and then Enix comes out and finds the second game. I think we're looking at a split.
I can see that. I want to do that in reverse.
In reverse?
I think Rival would be the ones making the comeback.
I think if Enix gets that first game, they're going to be riding the momentum, and Rival's going to, you know, I'm not going to say they're going to tilt, but I think Enix is just going to ride the momentum and get a 2-0 if they find game number 1.
I don't know. We saw Rival drop a game to the Poppies, and then they bounced back out of seemingly nowhere because of Geb solo. So you never really know what Rival's going to pull out.
You really don't, but Geb solo OP. So, you know, you got to cover your bases. That's it for us on the analyst desk. We're going to throw it to our casters for game number 1. Let's go it over.
Obey Alliance versus Elevate. That's where we're going to start off today. My name's Tom, and that'll be Toli. So these two teams, a very interesting setup. I'd say Obey kind of solidified as one of the absolute top teams, whereas Elevate, not so much. It's getting a little bit darker for them. How do you feel?
I feel like Obey are in a great spot, especially compared to Elevate. Obey only played 3 sets thus far and have 5 points. Splitting against Energy earlier on, they have 2 splits, whereas Elevate, they played 4 sets, only getting 4 points, 1 win and 1 split.
And so as they come into this one, what do you think the key factor is for Elevate to stay afloat?
They have great momentum when they can establish it from the early game, but the question is, can they get it against Obey Alliance, the spring champions? This team, Obey Alliance, has been on the up and up ever since the fall split of Season 3.
We'll take a look as we head into picks and bans right here, Elevate versus Obey Alliance. As I said before, first team on the left will be Elevate, so they get their first selection and their first ban. Keep in mind, their new jungler, not new to this week. He's been here for about a week or two. Cherryo, still relatively new, I'd say overall. Do you think they're going to, well, I'll take that away. I think that they're going to specialize and look for Cherryo's picks early on.
I think so too. They didn't play any Guardian or Naja the last time Cherryo made his debut back in here for Elevate, but this time around, I wouldn't be surprised if they start mixing things up, considering the fact that Elevate, they are a team that are still kind of experimenting here. They have a lot of potential. They just got to execute.
I like how Obey Alliance, their drafting, or their banning strategy rather, is specifically looked at the support player Dardez, keeping him out of control by way of being over-aggressive. Fafnir and Ares, 2 of his go-to selections, take it away. It's a different strategy, but I really like it.
But this leaves open a lot of other support options for Obey Alliance in the form of the Terra. Could be potentially in that solo lane, you never know. But with Wukong locked in, less than likely that we're going to see EmilZy on the monkey, while we're going to see maniaKK playing that instead, just to be a little more aggressive.
Elevate, however, they do go ahead and prioritize Cherryo's selection. That's the Nemesis right there, likely to be in the jungle. And then Scylla and Cernunnos for the mid lane nulisa and the long lane hunter Jermain. So Obey, they've got to select one more character here. Where I'd like to see them go mid lane.
It's very possible that they would look for PrettyPrime's pick, but Naja locked in this early for CaptainTwig. This is a god that he also likes to heavily prioritize for that early game aggression. I was surprised because I thought that maybe they would take over Ataraxia's pick here before the secondary ban phase. He likes to Jing Wei a lot, so I would assume that Elevate would ban it here.
Ataraxia can play kind of anything you give to him, so I'm not really too concerned there. Like I said, I wanted to see the mid lane. Elevate are going to focus on that position for the bans right now. Vulcan, and then maybe even a Nox ban. I'm very curious to see where they go to ban Scylla. It'll be the Ra. Scylla, I feel like Scylla does well against Ra. Why do you think they ban him?
I think the Ra ban was just to take away the option for the Wombo combo of the Naja take it to the sky, and then the Ra ulti on top, and not wanting to deal with the sustain, because there's always enough mages to follow up off of Naja anyway. You have your Thoth, you have your Poseidon, you have the Nox pick that you were talking about as well. Morrigan was also potential here if they really wanted to go for it, and they could even steal the Alma Monster for themselves.
Yeah, it's a big case. That's a big call right there, totally. Morgan or Nox is going to be my 2 guesses here for Obey Alliance, and it will be the Thoth, just the absolute fantastic confirm with that Naja ultimate. What goes up must come down, and while it's usually cited as a negative, it's also very much positive when Naja lands. The teammate mid knows as well. You can line that up and pretty much confirm the long-range Thoth ult.
That's true. That final judgment will just be so easily set up here for PrettyPrime. CaptainTwig loves to play aggressive, so that's more than likely what we're going to see out of Obey Alliance here, especially with this Wukong Naja combination against a Nike Nemesis. Nike is more one of these later stages gods that really benefit once you start stacking the passive, but up until that point, level 1 through 5, it's not the easiest time in the world for her.
Yeah, Elevator absolutely looking for the late game here, Anatoly. I think Jermain's character kind of hits his stride a little bit early, maybe mid-game. But when you're looking at nulisa, Cherryo, no numbers, they're definitely characters that need to sort of bake in the oven a little bit. Obey, on the other hand, you can see their strategy already looking towards their composition. Characters like Naja, maniaKK on the Sun Wukong, these characters want to be early aggressive.
This is like an assault match. There's just 5 people down the mid lane. All members from both teams were grouped up in the beginning just to gain a little bit of positioning to allow this mid-jungle control. But despite all that shenanigans, everyone just resets, dueling goes for their own red while solo goes to the wave.
I love the play coming out from Elevate specifically, because they're the ones kind of stopping the Okie Dog play. What we've seen a number of times is the teleport holding solo laner starts in the mid lane sneakily, right? They hide around a rock, and then they go for the kill, and whether or not that happens, they teleport over to the lane. So Elevate fan out, and they spread out as a 5-man unit, the 2 players right in the mid lane, and then the other 2 sides of the map flank, and just they make sure that nobody can surprise their mid lane, and then as soon as they have that info, they go back to the lane. That's a really creative strategy.
Well, speaking of creativity, Obey's dual lane between EmilZy and Ataraxia, they neglected the wave to be able to do the oracles. Both dual lanes went for their own red, own purple, but the only difference was Elevate's Bruise Brothers. They wanted to grab this wave. However, Obey don't lose too much gold here under their tier 1 tower. They lose all the melee minions, but they get the 6 archers, and as a result of grabbing the oracles, they're going to have that vision around that Gold Fury for 1 minute just to see where Cherryo is going to be at.
And more of an illustrative point than actually saying they have the lead, Obey are up about 400 gold despite the fact that they gave up the wave overall. So, like I said, it's not about a lead, it's just more about, well, that really was efficient.
It was pretty efficient, and considering that Obey was doing a pretty good job in the mid control as well, that despite the poke that PrettyPriMe received in the early stages, they were able to out-clear Cherryo and nulisa in that mid wave to be able to bounce into the jungle first.
Right, and you know, looking at that clear, you're going to expect that. Not necessarily because of the Scylla, but more because of the CaptainTwig. CaptainTwig on the Naja, he recently got a change that allowed him to clear even better, but even before that change was kind of okay. Stuck in a bad spot right here. Anatoly, he's going to just battle. Missed the ring. And that's a really big deal, but Elevate don't commit.
Now, that's a very important clear tactic here for CaptainTwig. PrettyPriMe is going to have to try to buy a little bit of time for his jungler to get in a safer spot, but nulisa neglecting any sort of poke here.
Wow, CaptainTwig getting out of that one. Meanwhile, dual lane first blood is strong. Dardez falls down to the hand of EmilZy. Right there, though, that play from CaptainTwig, not the cleanest. Elevate let him get away with a lot of mistakes without a punish.
That's true. He went from behind them without having his ring bounces available. He missed it
Or
in
the sash.
that little jungle encounter. So nulisa could have easily looked for some poke. She found the root, didn't want to invest into the crush because she wanted to use that for the wave specifically.
EmilZy coming through with the ultimate, looking for the dash, can't find the grab, but also will miss the stun. CaptainTwig solo side picks up no numbers on his first rotation of the game. 2-zip. Obey starting off clean.
Naja using his ultimate to be able to find that kill, and that's the one issue with the Nike. She doesn't really before you max out that second ability, you don't have the HP 5 to be able to sustain in the laning phase as long as you would like to.
I mean, Nike doesn't really, you say before you max out the 2. I feel like when you're talking about Nike, she doesn't really do much before ... She really doesn't do anything until level, I mean, fill in the blank here, level 10?
Yeah, once you max out the Ren, but you're looking at the matchup here, some Wukong can disrupt the Nike in 2 different ways, whether it's knocking her up with the Ox, or if there are no minions around her, then guaranteeing stun on that Tiger form. So no numbers is heavily invested towards the late game.
Yeah, just like the rest of Elevate's team as a whole. Cherryo and nulisa also on these late game characters, as we illustrated earlier. And Obey Alliance, they're playing exactly as their composition would lead you to believe. 1,500 plus in the lead early on, because as I said, maniaKK, you mentioned he's going to disrupt this lane early on. Naja, early aggressor. No surprise that we got the kill in the solo lane.
And there's no problem in terms of playing towards the late game. A lot of players get into this mindset like, oh, if I lose laning phase, I lose the game. But honestly, we've seen a lot of options in terms of Amaterasu making a huge impact in these games. Nike, as long as you get these 3 stacks, you're gonna allow your team to be in a very comfortable spot.
And that's one of the bigger differences as CaptainTwig misses his sash between that ranked mentality that we constantly reference when we see newer players come into the league and we question their mental fortitude, right? Competitive is a completely different beast, Anatolian, and you just have to be able to sort of shake those early cobwebs where Elevate right now, down 2,000 in 5 minutes. If you're in a ranked game, you're probably angry right now.
Sure.
But knowing this is competitive, there's so many different variables, this is fine.
Everything could just be at a standstill. As long as Elevate have the necessary vision to spot out the aggression from Obey Alliance, they can make the necessary rotations. If they are behind levels, they could just look for opposite plays on the opposite side of the map. You ward around the right, you go for the left.
Nice collapse. Obey went for the left, or the mid lane chasing her into the left. nulisa gets out of there thanks to the beads, but Obey's certainly aware that that tool is on cooldown. maniaKK now in trouble. One more does it. And Elevate answer back with a kill on the enemy solo lane.
That was such a clear bait from No Numbers. He used the Ren so far away from the wave that he was only going to hit maniaK and the melee minions in the process, and baiting out that Tiger Stun without the escape and without any mana to go into that Somersault Cloud. It was such an easy gank opportunity for Cherryo.
maniaK really going to take that opportunity any chance he gets by going for the Ren just on the melee minions. maniaK thinks that, yeah, I've scared him, I've pushed him out, I'm the early game aggressor, watch me go. Very, very intelligent rotation from Cherryo and the guys on Elevate there to make that play on the solo lane.
And Nemesis is a great god to be ganking that solo lane with her Divine Judgment, stealing away a large portion of your health. You're gaining movement speed, you're stripping away protections. Without the escape from the Eagle form, you're guaranteed dead.
There's a lot of characters that you sit there and go, look, man, I'm just not ganking solo lane.
Yeah.
You really expect me, a Bastet, to go and kill a farmed, I don't even care, Hercules, right? Like, that's not going to happen.
However, there is potential because the fact that the kitties can body block. So
Stop it!
You're waiting for that important dash, and then you drop the kitties and the scratchies.
My point is, and you know my point is
I know you're fine. She's more of a late game god that's waiting for her physical power to come online, whereas Nemesis doesn't need those items to be effective. The base stats of her kit in general is just strong enough. Similar style to Serket.
I think you just wanted to say kitties and scratchies.
You got me, Tom.
I know you way too well, Tolly. Either way, Cherryo on a fantastic selection, and that's why. So they prioritize the Nemesis selection so that Cherryo does have that option. A lot of junglers, as we just hilariously illustrated, don't have that early game option to look for the solo lane. Left side, Oracles go down to Elevate after a brief little duel. 1800 in the lead still is Obey.
Neither team really electing to go for the Gold Fury quite yet. Still relatively early in the game, so I like the fact that obviously Elevate aren't committing to it, but committing into the mid lane is going to be Obey.
Yeah, Cherryo down about half HP. He's safe under the tower. nulisa gets it. She's a monster. Finds a kill on a CaptainTwig. Looking for number 2. Will miss by a mile, but the damage is done already. Elevate tie the game 2-2, still trailing by a chunk of gold.
And at the tail end of that, you hear one of the laurels being popped by Nike. This means that they get that first stack. That's going to be that 250 minion death stack, which going to give her team that 2% movement speed and 4% additional power to start things off. And once they get 10 kills on the board, you're going to increase both the power and the movement speed by 2.
And that's really the key there and you know, that Nike is probably the best example. Because normally we have to sort of show scaling and the way power items work and this, that, or third. Elevator literally just waiting for the game to get later so they can get stronger.
Especially with nulisa, if she connects on those Alma monsters the first time around, and whether or not she connects on the second, the first one is good enough. Anything after that is just extra, because honestly, we all joke about zoning ults, but that in itself, everyone is just looking at nulisa when she goes into that form.
And that's a really big point there, Anatoly, is the I love intangibles. I love stuff that doesn't show up on the scoreboard. As Jermain takes the fight to Ataraxia. And you're 100% right. When you hear that, there's like a bell sound almost, the ding, and then I'm a monster, and you look at the Scylla, whatever the target call was for Obey is immediately changed. You get in the head of the shot caller, and you stop everybody from doing what they were doing previously, because if you get hit with a monster when you're not paying attention, you're getting yelled at.
That's true. Having to invest into some of these Aegis amulets here. Only one on the side of PrettyPriMe and 2 bracers of undoing for both EmilZy and CaptainTwig. I like the style because this item, what it provides for yourself, by activating it, you get that 3-second cooldown reduction, and any amount of damage you take in the last 3 seconds or so, it's like a little miniature Chronos ultimate where you're getting about 50% health and mana returned.
Yeah, it's 3 seconds and then 5 seconds the last that you get your health back on the on the upgrade. But yeah, the minus 3 seconds on the cooldown, I love it. A lot of outplay potential. I love it specifically on characters like the Naja, who, oh no, I'm in trouble. I can bracer and sash my way out, bracer and heal my way out when you just need a couple of extra seconds to really get out of jail. On the Terra, on the support character, I am a little more torn. I kind of wish there was a more team-oriented selection there. Meditation has been hit, Shell has been hit, Frenzy has been hit, but these are all still options, and I'd like to see them on the support.
But the fact of the matter is that EmilZy, when he uses that Terra's Blessing, he gets the cooldown reduction, so he pops that ultimate, he uses his abilities, and by having that 20 to 40% CDR, depending what rank it is, it's going to be able to pop even more cooldowns off of it. So he's going to get a large amount of cooldowns during one encounter with Terra's Blessing.
Okay, sure. I'll give you that. We're using the bracer with the ultimate in mind is always rough. CaptainTwig gets even rougher, missing the sash by maybe half an inch there.
He was just kind of trying to zone away no numbers away from
he's
this
looking
blue
for the
buff.
kill. If CaptainTwig connects there and gets the kill, he was just half an inch short.
Well, the thing was he used the ring bounce on the blue buff to kill the little blue ogres, and then because the fact that we saw maniaKK go into no numbers, that's what procced him to reset the blue buff and try to go for the kill. I'm not sure if that would have been a kill considering the item choices here. Mark of the Vanguard, Silver Breastplate. That's a decent amount of physical protections.
By himself, no, but with maniaKK on the floor, oh well.
Possibly.
Oh well.
Bracer of Undoing for no numbers as well, so any sort of gank here from Naja, as soon as you come landing down, that's going to return a decent chunk as well.
Exactly. That's the other side of the Bracer of Undoing, the heal aspect of it, which is rather strong. It's you get half of the HP that you lost in the last 3 seconds gets smacked right on back with the use of that Bracer. I think this is going to be, with the change to Sunder, totally, I think this is going to be the new hotness. And listen, it's strong. Ooh, I don't know about that dive, but I really hope I don't. I like watching this item. I think there's a lot of outplay potential, and it's skillful rather than just Sunder.
I absolutely agree. It reminds me of the old school
Beats.
Hercules mitigate wounds where he would take a lot of damage.
nulisa taking a lot of damage, forced into the ages. maniaKK gonna help out with Ram. Finds it. There's the ultimate. Number 3 for Obey Alliance as the Monkey Man is so deep. And that's his decoy. Up front is going to be a different story, however. Still, a 5-on-2. Cherryo, you got to get out of there.
Cherryo in no numbers and just no man's land. The Bruise Brothers were too far back, getting zoned away from that decoy. And Jermain gonna find 5 members of Obey Alliance surrounding him. Those are 2 dead Elevate members. And without too many healthy remaining members out of Elevate, Obey could look for this gold.
They absolutely could, and I think they will out of Tully. You can see Elevate going to the other side of the map looking for the Portal Demon, perhaps. I think that would be the nice call, but instead, too thin are the ranks. And so Elevate get the only objective here. 13 minutes on the clock. PrettyPriMe slays the Gold Fury, and that puts Obey up about 5,000 gold. Elevate get to the Portal Demon late, like you said, Tully, but
Twiggy's gonna look for it. The ring bounces is there, but I'm a monster being used just to confirm it. That one cooldown alone, though, could spell Obey's aggression, but no, everyone is on the left-hand side anyway.
Yeah, I like that play. I think that's the right call from the Elevate mid laner. Absolutely looking for just something. You can't get left behind. You got to find something. So, what do we call it? The crumbs after the stuff after the stuff?
Sure. Elevate responding in kind, getting at least 750 gold in their pocket, keeps the lead relatively tame. And by tame, this is still kind of a stretch because Obey have a 5,000 gold lead at this 14-minute mark. This is pretty substantial, not to mention the experience is right on the same pacing.
Yeah, and with the experience so high, that's really what Elevate have to be afraid about. And the fact that they're the late game team here and Obey are the ones that are accelerated. Elevate are going to reach their late game prowess after Obey are kind of a step ahead of them. So really Elevate need to look to pivot this game into their direction.
Oh wow, Cherryo, nice stun from PrettyPriMe. EmilZy following up. Divine Judgment in return, but EmilZy's going to proc that Terra's Blessing. CaptainTwig connects on the stun.
Great catch. The shield is going to help him out a little bit. maniaKK on the chase as well. However, Cherryo can't get out of here, folks. Got to get shield. That will change things. Dardez from the left side saves his jungler. Excellent play by the French support. Cherryo was toast without that.
Oh, Ataraxia, he hits 2, but Cherryo uses that Retribution shield. Will survive for the time being. It was also a great ultimate from Jermain, that wild hunt, just to turn everybody into that piggy form, keeping his teammate alive.
Well done by Elevate. Cherryo, a little bit out of position, but really just obey good aggression. They saw an inch and took it a mile, and Cherryo gets out of there thanks to some strong team help.
A lot of ultimates. A lot of ultimates were used from Obey trying to commit to that 4 specifically, but only 2 on the side of Elevate to be expended. So Elevate could look to put a little bit of pressure with that advantage.
Yeah, this is the time where Elevate should look for a fight. I mean, I say that cautiously because they're down by 4,000, but with the ultimate situation, this is where you want.
Whenever you're behind, you got to look for any little factor that is in your advantage. There's always a small window for a team that's behind to take advantage of. This is that opportunity for Elevate. We're looking at the difference of I'm a monster versus Final Judgment. If one of those cooldowns is not available, that team fight is heavily in the other's
collapse.
favor.
Elevate need to collapse right now. Jermain should make the call to collapse on Ataraxia. PrettyPriMe trying to play bouncer here, and he successfully does so. Dashes in the mid lane, catches Cherryo sleeping. There's going to be no numbers coming up forward to protect everybody else. Well done by Elevate to prevent the onslaught, but can they cause problems themselves? Cherryo says yes. Take it down, maniaKK.
maniaKK, nowhere to go. CaptainTwig gonna stun out Jermain, but the crush connects onto 3. Ataraxia into the sky, trying to find no numbers, connects on 2. Third one doesn't matter because everyone is zoned away. Oh, they are gonna grab this tier 1.
And that's the moment. Hesitation is devastation. You absolutely have to take a look at the situation where you're at and how everything is going to work off of the time and place that your team is in. Elevate had the situation. We talked about it. They had the opportunity. They waited 7 seconds. By the time that everybody collapsed onto Ataraxia, the ultimates were already back up for Obey Alliance, and the window was slammed shut. Everybody chasing PrettyPriMe here, totally. I don't think it's going to work.
No, not at all. Nice little dash backwards into the safety. That Terra's Blessing doing
Double
work.
stun.
The double stun. nulisa is going to fall. Dardez could follow up here. Ataraxia trying to find it, but the Geb Shield will buy him some time. Great aggression from Elevate because their whole mindset was having no numbers, teleport into that mid-wave just to find the collapse. But that Terra's Blessing turned everything around, just giving more mobility, clear casting for Obey Alliance, allow them to tip the tides in their favor.
Man, I'm so upset almost about Elevate's lack of aggression there. If they make that play 5 to 7 seconds earlier, that team fight goes differently, the objective goes differently, and Elevate tie the game, potentially.
Cherryo trying to make a play 1v2 against PrettyPriMe and CaptainTwig. Not the place you really want to be against this level 16 Nasha, 15 Thoth. The level 14 Nemesis can't really find any sort of opportunities here.
Yeah, not at all, really. No numbers being collapsed on by 2. Make that 3 players as CaptainTwig comes over to the right-hand side, finds the sash. The shield is just gone as quickly as it showed up, forcing out the ultimate from the Nike player. And Obey 3 members strong here on the right side looking for the tower, but here comes nulisa. Root is good, Crush not so strong. Monkey able to dash away from that one. Now the mage, beautiful ultimate, saving the life, but still not enough as PrettyPriMe comes through in the clutch to take down nulisa.
The timing of that ultimate from nulisa was well timed because the fact that it negated the ultimate from CaptainTwig. But despite all that, you still take damage from the initial hit when Nasha connects onto you. Despite not taking you into the sky, it gives you that one little hit anyway, and then that one little hit whenever you come landing down. And there was just too much damage dealt onto nulisa. Without your mid-mage here, Elevate have to concede this Portal Demon and more than likely this Gold Fury.
Well, it was a great play. It was a great play by Obey's mid laner PrettyPriMe there. So CaptainTwig goes in with the sash. The answer back is the mid lane nulisa's ultimate to make her CC immune. And then as soon as nulisa goes into the ultimate, PrettyPriMe just readies the cannon, waiting for her to stand still. Doesn't even wait for her to pull the trigger, just shoots her, making sure that she can't counterattack. Nulisa could have gotten 1 or 2 kills there had she found the mark, but too fast is PrettyPriMe. Extremely well done by the mid laner for Obey Alliance. 8-3. Obey Alliance are leading this game rather strongly at 19.5. They're up 8,000 gold, and Elevate need to find a way back into this one.
They still have those late game victory conditions like we mentioned before, heavily relying the damage from nulisa, the utility between the damage boost and the movement speed boost from no numbers, Nike passive stacks, and Cherryo will always make it much easier to take out these tanky targets between his passive and that ultimate. So maniaKK has to watch out whenever he gets chain CC between the Cataclysm and the knockup, which is why he invested into the Stone of Gaia to make sure that when he does get Cataclysmed, he has enough time to get into that Somersault Cloud before the knockup.
That's another one of the many benefits of having Naja available. Flaming Spear, which is, I mean, depending on which option you're going for, you can either max Flaming Spear or the Sash after your ring bounce. Flaming Spear lowers the cooldown, giving you more heals more often. Also, 55% attack speed. You're going to shred that Gold Fury. So Elevate, they don't even watch. They're not even there. Obey take the Gold Fury with just a Hunter and a Jungler. Interesting itemization choice coming out here from CaptainTwig as well. He's got the Talaria boots.
And you're talking about interesting item choices. Not only does he have Talaria boots, but he's going for this defensive option, probably going to be that Spirit's Robe here, going for that Brawler's Beatstick just to negate some of the healing potentially out of Jermain within his kit, not to mention no numbers with that HP 5. We're also looking at a crazy amount of attack speed coming out of Ataraxia here. He went for this Odysseus Bow Executioner combination, and it synergizes pretty well because the way Executioner works is you want to be able to build those 3 stacks to get the physical shred here, or physical protection shred.
Cherryo doing some shredding himself, finding CaptainTwig with the ultimate, but unable to really hard commit. And I think the reason we're seeing those 2 items, Talaria Boots and Odysseus Bow, you know what the unique factor connecting those 2 items are? Well, okay. Odysseus Bow has 0 power. Talaria Boots has minimal power compared to the other options.
Sure.
My point is that Shifter Shield is a new item in the meta offering so much physical power that you can forgo some of the power in lieu of other stats because Shifter Shield is going to be so prevalent in your builds.
That's true, but in the mid lane, Obey, they're grouped up. They have this advantage of huge amount of gold, and almost 10,000 specifically, and they're going to take it into full force here, trying to find that right angle here, even warding right underneath. maniaKK is going to tank the tower while Ataraxia just absolutely demolishes
Elevate
it.
being a little obtuse here, just defending the tier 2 for no reason. Fall back on the Phoenix. Obey just topples it. Tier 2 goes down 1,500 in the pocket of the red team.
maniaKK forced to use that ultimate just to survive a little bit longer. Twiggy taking a little bit of poke from that crush. Still a good amount of ultimates from Obey Alliance. That wombo combo between Twig and PrettyPriMe still available. And if you're Elevate, that's one dangerous threat.
Yeah, the big deal for Elevate is that they still have nulisa's ultimate online. Oh, Jermain. PrettyPriMe finds him with the giggle. But nulisa's ultimate's still there. Cherryo and nulisa can just obliterate one person very quickly.
And Cherryo's ultimate coming back off of cooldown. Very short cooldown as you level this ability, going from 90 seconds base up to 70 once it does get maxed out. So despite Nemesis not always having to be from ahead, can still be that ult bot.
Uh-oh, here comes trouble. This dash forward from Obey is problematic for Elevate. They don't want to fight in that corridor unless nulisa can land the pops like that. Beads as she goes through the wall. There's help from CaptainTwig, bringing a player to the sky. He'll land down. Jermain in trouble. Dashing away left side. PrettyPriMe for the left. Watch out. nulisa is in trouble. There's the mage. She avoids it. Turns into the ultimate herself. Backside, trying to avoid it. But PrettyPriMe finds her with the second shot of 3.
Trying to cancel just a Sentinel into the mid lane. No numbers is going to be Sentineling back to base here. 3 dead on the side of Elevate, and this late game potential from Obey Alliance is going to equal in towards the Fire Giant buff.
Yeah, Obey Alliance up by a slew right now. That team fight, I think, was Elevate's last shot to really come into it, and they had a kind of decent go for it.
It was a great play here from nulisa to start things off. She found a 3-man root, 4-man crush right between that speed and blew out of Obey Alliance. The problem was everyone else from Elevate didn't really want to follow up here, forcing even out some relics. That could have been I'm a monster, especially considering PrettyPriMe wasn't in that encounter quite yet.
Yeah, that was oh man, that was rough. I said Elevate didn't want to fight in that corridor, but if Obey gets stuck and then nulisa lands on them, well then you take the opportunity that's given, even if it's not. That's the difference between theory and practice.
Sure.
No coach will ever tell you to fight on the enemy side of the Fire Giant jungle in that section between the speed buff and the other rock. But when you hit 4 players with a crush, you break the rules and you go for that fight.
That's just the starting key to victory there. Whenever you're the first one to strike, yeah, you can maybe, you know, fall back to reset and try to look for some more pokets. But considering that EmilZy is playing this Terra, he has some sustain options here. Not only does he have that Monolith or the Terra's Blessing, but sitting on that Sovereignty gives him enough HP 5 for him and his teammates. Not to mention maniaKK has a crazy amount of regen with that Stone of Gaia.
On the other hand, Obey played it so differently that Elevate couldn't expect to see it. Gold Fury going down here to Obey, pushing them even further in the lead. What I mean to say is, when you get hit by a 4 and 3 man crush, you retreat. That's the quote-unquote right call, right? Obey just ran at you, and I think they honestly took Elevate by surprise there, and that's what won the team fight.
And despite having the Nike passive for that movement speed, it doesn't really matter when you're looking at EmilZy playing the Terra. For her ultimate, you're able to outrun that passive, especially considering there's only 2% from that passive currently, where only 1 Laurel for the Nike. But either way, though, the option here that Twig did to start things off for his team was he found Jermain out of position, he found him in the ulti, and without a Hunter here for Elevate, the rest of the team fight was just destined to fail out of them.
That's a good play right there. Tier 2 going to be answered back by Nemesis over here. Cherryo on the split push. I like that choice, Soli. I don't like it when teams defend the Tier 2 tower. I'd rather see them defend the Phoenix because it's just better geography.
And that's exactly what Cherryo wants to do. He responded Tier 2 for Tier 2, but he's not going to get here in time, I feel like, to defend this Phoenix. Obey are going to force the issue.
Yeah, there's going to be forward. Dardez in trouble before he even makes an impact. Jermain lets the ultimate go, and there's help from mid lane, but not enough. Ataraxia taking down Cherryo. Shots from the sky, corralling Jermain back into the base. maniaKK outside. That does it, folks. 15-3. Elevate lose by about 20,000 gold.
Obey Alliance looking so dominant, just like they did in the spring split. This is just a team you have to respect every single time. Their picks and bans sometimes are very flexible. You never really know which direction they're going to go. We remember during the first game, that third pick, Naja, coming out of CaptainTwig. You thought it was going to be mid. I thought it was going to be for Ataraxia. You never really know with this team.
Yeah, and the Naja selection, I think, was really important. I loved the overall draft out of Obey Alliance. Naja, the maniaKK choice of the monkey, and even the mid lane Thoth. The mid lane Thoth goes hand in hand with the jungler. maniaKK and Naja together can go ahead and push forward with that mid-game synergy. This was a very, very well-drafted selection coming out from Obey.
And I just think that the way they played it, too, worked so efficiently for them. Elevate just really didn't have any responses.
Sure.
You know, there was 2 early kills here that Twig assisted in. There was 1 response from Cherryo onto maniaKK in the solo lane, but it just wasn't enough. A lot of the buffs from Elevate were stripped away. They couldn't really find these team fights in their favor. The control here specifically from EmilZy playing the Terra just outweighing Dardez playing the Gab, I feel like.
Yeah, that fight over there by the back Harpies was an issue. There was a couple of moments where I think Elevate really needed to turn it around. That one was just kind of unfortunate, but I think the subsequent team fights had echoes of that one where they collapsed onto nulisa in the back line. From that point on, Elevate really couldn't find their footing, and that eventually wound up giving Obey the victory. Game 2.